Well, good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to the show. Glad my camera could join us as well. My name is Justin. I'm one of the astronomers here at the Science Museum of Virginia. Happy to be with you for another virtual show. If you're just joining me for the first time, I took a little hiatus here, but did these shows over the summer for you as well. If you like what you see today, I think I've got 20 of them in the archives here, so you can catch up with the back catalog as well. If you've watched previously, welcome back. Always happy to have you here. And of course, happy to have the support of our sponsor for this series, Allianz Partners. Thanks for making this virtual programming possible. Now, if you are just joining us for the first time, or maybe it's been a few weeks, a couple of reminders about the show. For these live astronomy shows, we use the same kind of software that we use up in the Dome Theater here at the museum. It's called Digistar, and it can do some pretty cool stuff. So I recommend watching this on a nice big monitor if you can. Put the video full screen so you can really see what the software has to offer. If you've got questions throughout the show, feel free to leave those down in the comments down below. May be able to answer some of them during the show or circle back with you later on in the comments or maybe in a future show. More on that at the end so you don't forget it. Today I thought, it's been a lot in the news recently, and so I thought I'd give you some neat stories that may have slipped through the cracks for you, maybe some numbers that you haven't heard quite yet. So well, let's get started. Let's see what is going on in space right now. I'm going to get us switched over to Digistar here, and we're going to kick things off with a kind of interesting milestone. Earlier this week, there was an historic day. It was on Monday. On Monday, we marked the 20th anniversary of something that happened way back in the year 2000. Ah, yes, the year 2000. Nothing strange about this week 20 years ago. In fact, it was 7,309 days ago, plus a few hours, when something pretty amazing happened. No, it's not that. That was the day that 3 astronauts, part of a crew called Expedition 1, arrived at the International Space Station. So they arrived at the space station 20 years ago on Monday. They stayed up there for 5.5 months or so, and they came home. No big deal, right? Well, before the Expedition 1 crew came home, there were already more astronauts on the space station. So the occupation of the space station was uninterrupted there. And that cycle has continued for the last 7,309 days. So that means every single day for the last 20 years, there have been people living in space, which I think is pretty amazing. I mean, there are people that maybe voted this week that every single day of their lives, people have been living in space. There have always been some humans that are not on the Earth for the last 20 years, which I think is pretty impressive. And the International Space Station that you're looking at here really started as a collaboration between 2 longtime foes. The 2 biggest partners on the space station, the United States and Russia, of course, that whole space race through the 60s and 70s, America trying to get to the moon. Russia kind of shifts their focus to space stations. The U.S. wants to build their own space station. It turns out we need the Russians to help us in the 1990s. So they partner on the International Space Station, and in the last 20 years, 64 different crews of astronauts have visited the space station, lived there for extended periods of time, 3, 4, 5, 6 months at a time. A couple astronauts even teamed up on what was essentially a year-long mission. And no immediate plans for the space station to stop hosting astronauts, probably at least through the middle of the 2020s. So those plans are still developing as we speak. The next crew, though, I can tell you, is about to grow. The last group of astronauts you just saw scrolling past, Expedition 64, is going to get just a little bit larger in a few days. In about 1 week, a week from tomorrow, there's a launch planned from Kennedy Space Center. This will be the launch of what is called Crew 1. That's kind of strange. I just finished telling you it was Expedition 64. Well, yeah, it's Expedition 64 on the space station, but this will be the first operational launch of the SpaceX Crew Dragon spacecraft. They're under contract with NASA to provide crew rotation support to the International Space Station. You may recall in late May when the second test flight of the Crew Dragon launched, carrying Doug Hurley and Bob Behnken. Now, on the 14th of November, the first operational launch, an international crew of 4 astronauts headed to the International Space Station, joining Expedition 64, bringing that crew up to 7 astronauts. So stay tuned for that. We'll certainly have more updates for you. I've got a reminder at the very end of the show to let you know where you can tune in to see that. So you go 20 years of astronauts living on the space station. I think that's pretty neat. And if you want to see what it's like on the International Space Station, next time you're able to join us here at the museum in the Dome, I can actually transport you to the International Space Station. This isn't quite as impressive when I do it on a small screen like this, because it's kind of like looking at internet pictures on the internet. But just imagine this image completely surrounding you onto the largest screen in the state. It's pretty impressive. And this particular view is actually inside what is called the Unity node. That was the first American segment of the space station, joining a Russian capsule at the beginning of space station construction, and just one of the 3 that Expedition 1 had to occupy. Now the station has grown immensely. It's about the size of a 3-bedroom house on the interior. So pretty tight quarters for a crew of 7, but it's okay. The astronauts have been training for that. And the space station's real purpose is to help us learn how to live in space for extended periods of time, for missions back to the moon, headed to Mars, things like that. So quite a testament to what humans can accomplish there. I've got a couple of other things to share with you today, in addition to that major milestone. The next one might sound kind of familiar if you've watched previous episodes. We're going to go visit another one of my favorite spacecraft. It is the TESS spacecraft. This is one of our missions we've got looking for exoplanets, planets outside of our solar system. But today, we're not going to talk about those exoplanets. Though, as a side note, just this week, we crossed the 4,300 mark in terms of number of planets we know of outside of our solar system. That's pretty neat. But instead, I'm going to focus on some other science that TESS can do. Because TESS just stares up at the sky for extended periods of time, it has the chance to see all kinds of interesting things. You may recall, if you've seen some of the previous shows where I visited TESS, that it spends about a month, 27 days, staring at these big patches of the sky. I'm going to put a couple of them on the screen for you. So the blue stripe and the red stripe, see enough of those colors here recently. Those are just tracing out 2 patches of sky where TESS watched last year. Each one of those stripes observed for about a month. Both of those stripes actually composed of 20,000 individual dots. It's a perfect tie. But what I want to focus on here are some objects that TESS may have uncovered in our own solar system. TESS watches for these exoplanets by staring at these distant stars, waiting for them to perhaps dip in brightness just a little bit, indicating that a planet is going around a distant star. But there are other things the spacecraft can see. And I believe it was last week, at a meeting of the American Astronomical Society's Division of Planetary Sciences, Yale grad student Milena Rice revealed some research that showed how TESS can help us find objects right here in the solar system. Here's an actual video that maybe looks a little confusing to you, but basically what's going on the left-hand side of the video, those are the images as they come down from the space, the TESS spacecraft. And Rice is accounting for the possible motion of an object in the distant reaches of the solar system, way beyond Neptune. On the right, just adding up the individual frames, that leaves you with basically a blank background. You see the streaks of a couple of asteroids going by, and then just above center, there was one bright spot there. Now that particular bright spot was a known object, a world in the outer solar system named Sedna. But after that proof of concept, Rice sent all the observations from the two colored stripes you're seeing on the screen through her computer program. Those are two of Tess's previous sectors, sectors 18, 19, 40,000 stars altogether, but just looking for other things that may have been flying through the field of view. And in those two colored stripes, I've actually added them to the screen, but you may have missed them. A couple of yellow dots. Interesting. 17 of those. Let's see where they are. So I'm just going to drift away from Tess's location here in orbit around the Earth, and I'm going to add some helpful markers to the screen for you. There's the orbit of the Moon, so we know how far away that is. We'll get the orbits of the planets on the screen. There's Earth's orbit and the other inner planets for you as they come into view there. And there you go, the Sun. We got the asteroid belt, so that means the gas giant planets are next, and those yellow dots will come back once we get far enough away. So there we are, out beyond the orbit of Neptune. You see some of the slightly more familiar objects in the Kuiper belt, the orbits of some other distant dwarf planets out there. And these yellow dots are the estimated positions of 17 objects that showed up in those TESS images. And keep in mind, this is just a tiny fraction of the sky. If Rice analyzes the rest of the old TESS data, many more may turn up. Now, these haven't even been confirmed yet. It may well be that something's a bit off in the analysis, and maybe not all these objects are real. But I think kind of the cool thing is that if the right objects here are confirmed, kind of rotate around a little bit so you get a better sense of where they are. The outer 3, 4, 5 of these, if any of those are confirmed to exist, they would set new records for the most distant objects we've actually observed in the solar system. We know of objects that travel farther from the sun. In fact, many of them are involved in an interesting idea about the existence of another planet in the outer solar system. You can see their orbits there. But when all these objects were discovered, they were much closer to the sun. We haven't seen them at the extent of their orbits, the outer reaches of their orbits. So we don't know how these yellow dots may orbit the sun, if indeed they are real. But if they are out there, may have set a record for the new most distant object that the humans have observed. I think that's pretty neat. So stay tuned for updates there. One more for you here, and since we're already on the topic of small objects in the solar system, let me share some updates from the last show. When I last joined you back on October 20th, we were talking about asteroids, as I tend to do, and we were talking specifically about the OSIRIS-REx mission and its mission at the asteroid Bennu. So let's zoom back in to the inner solar system here, and this time we're going to take a closer look at Bennu. Now, I don't want to focus on what Digistar can do for us here because, well, I've got brand new images from the spacecraft that haven't totally gotten integrated into the software yet. So we're going to get close enough to Bennu to see it, and then I'll show you what OSIRIS-REx actually saw. If you need a refresher, head to the video archive here on Facebook. Check out the previous live astronomy show. Again, that was on October 20th. That was kind of a preview to the activities when OSIRIS-REx was going to descend to the surface of Bennu and collect a sample of the asteroid for return to Earth and eventual study by scientists here on the planet. A little bit better to bring some asteroid home to us than just waiting for the asteroid to arrive on its own. This is the kind of asteroid, though, that may one day impact the Earth, so it's exactly the kind that we want to study in detail. Already, some of the latest data from OSIRIS-REx has revealed that these rocks are fairly brittle. Some of the bigger ones may not survive a trip through Earth's atmosphere. It is found that the interior density of the asteroid is fairly low. There may be big voids, big empty spaces inside the asteroid. All pretty interesting information. But let's go to the main event. You're already seeing some of the real images that OSIRIS-REx collected back on October 20th. And I'm playing them back for you here in real time, snapping a picture every 1.25 seconds. So that's about the rate that you're seeing them on your screen here. NASA initially released an accelerated video, a sped up video, but I think it's kind of neat to watch it in real speed, because watch what happens when OSIRIS-REx touches the asteroid. There it goes. Shortly after making contact with the surface of Bennu, OSIRIS-REx shoots that puff of nitrogen gas I talked about in the last show. It remains in contact with the asteroid for about 6 seconds, so about 6 frames in the video that you're watching now. Its arm, the sampling arm, is extending out from the bottom of the video, actually penetrated through the surface of Bennu, may have been underground as deep as about 18 inches, 1.5 feet. And that's great news, because that was thought to help the spacecraft collect a sample. But with those little bits of material flying around, perhaps shouldn't be a surprise they were able to collect a sample. But I'm going to circle back to that topic in just a second. That video came out pretty quickly. You may have already seen NASA's version of it, but I've got a slightly newer one for you, or at least, well, I guess about a week ago now, but slightly more dramatic, is actually the wide angle camera. So that first video, that's the zoomed in view, so you can see exactly what OSIRIS-REx was doing when it came into contact with the asteroid. But I don't know. I kind of like this video a little bit better. This is the nav cam, or the navigation camera. A wider angle helps the spacecraft orient itself and find its way down to the sample site, which has just arrived at the top of the frame there. You're not actually going to see the sampling arm in this video, but you will see its shadow. And this video, again, obviously sped up quite a bit, but it's okay. That'll let us get to the moment of impact right about here. And just look at what the spacecraft did to the asteroid. A lot of material was churned up by that little puff of nitrogen gas. And there are a few other frames that show a little more of the aftermath there. But the good news is that that impact, that puff of nitrogen gas, everything went as planned. And here's actually an image from a couple of days later. That's the other side of the sampling head. And you see some other little bits still flying around. So, that's not from the videos we just watched. The sampling head is so full that OSIRIS-REx is actually overflowing with material from asteroid Bennu. The hope was to get at least 60 grams. Since we just passed Halloween, it's about the size of a full-size candy bar. If they really did fill up the sampling head to overflowing, as it appears they did, it could be a few times more than that. It could be more like a 5-pound bag of flour or sugar, to stick with the candy bar analogy. So the mission team sped up their plans to stow their sample. So here again, more real images from the spacecraft. The sampling head we've seen in those previous videos actually getting inserted into the capsule that will bring it back to the Earth. To get it locked in, they pull on the arm a couple of times, make sure it's latched in there. They cut the connection between the arm and the sampling head, and then they seal up the lid. Since that sampling head continued leaking little pieces, they wanted to contain it as quickly as possible. So the sample head will now remain in that the so-called sample return container until it returns to the Earth. Just because of orbital dynamics, the spacecraft can't leave the neighborhood of Bennu until next March of 2021. And then it takes a couple more years for it to get back to the Earth. It'll be in late 2023 when the spacecraft flies by the Earth again and drops off that sample. Then mission scientists will get to retrieve the sample return capsule. They'll open it up and they'll actually see what they got back. So pretty sure everything went as planned. Pretty sure there's a very large sample of asteroid Bennu headed back to the Earth, but we'll know for sure in about 3 years. In the more immediate future, there are other things to keep an eye on. So let's look ahead at the space calendar here. The one thing I've already talked about, we've got the Expedition 1 anniversary back there on November 2nd. Today is kind of an interesting day in astronomical history. That image there is of an object that's left over from something called Tycho's supernova. That is the supernova remnant from an explosion that was first spotted on Earth in the 1570s. Quite a long time ago, but it kind of got modern astronomy really started. It showed that things can change in the sky. So that's an important story that maybe I can tell on another day. This calendar also shows us some interesting birthdays. Edmund Halley, Carl Sagan, William Herschel, Edwin Hubble, all coming up this year, this month, among many others. And November 24th might be a day to keep an eye on as well. That is the potential launch date for a new mission to the moon. It's being launched by China, and information about their launches isn't always readily available to the public. So that's the expected day. We'll have more updates for you as they become available. And you'll also want to watch November 20th because that's when I'll be back with you. Planning to do these online shows every 2 weeks now. So same time, same place, November 20th. That's when I plan to be back with you. So stay tuned for updates. Certainly have more to share with you then. And of course, don't forget, between now and the 20th, the next big space thing that might catch your attention, the launch of Crew 1. That is, again, November 14th. Got the time for you on the screen as well, a bit before 7 p.m. here on the East Coast. If you do want to watch, just head to NASA's website. They'll have links for you there. It'll be pretty tough to miss. You can head directly to the NASA TV links by going to nasa.gov/live. So there you go. There's what's going on in space right now. Some of the latest news for you. I'm going to track down some more updates for you. We'll have more to share with you in the future. Hope you can join us in the Dome again soon, and I hope you can join me right here on Facebook again in 2 weeks. Until then, stay safe out there, and hope to see you on the 20th.